Welcome to the Level Set. We are happy to see you and be in community with you. I am tickled pink this morning. I'm joined by the Dr. Charles Alexander and attorney extraordinaire Jerry T. Kwame Christmas is joining us live on set of the Sister Strut, St. Louis, Missouri. And so, we're not going to air this live today because I don't want you to know his actual location and overwhelm him. We don't want you to overwhelm him with all these requests and legal questions while he's out here trying to give back to the community. But anyway, we're going to deal with a subject that really is a microcosm of what we deal with and what we're continuing to dealing with, which is the status quo's pattern of of leveling out a incredible, harsh, oppressive action to an individual, then dehumanizing that individual. So you begin to discredit that individual, and it also is an opportunity to justify the incredibly horrible actions of the empire. And this is from the playbook. The playbook is really simple as it relates to dealing with the oppressed. Number one is, we indebt them. Number two, we make sure that we divide and conquer them. Number three, we push off an ethos of scarcity. And number four, we keep them afraid. And this is all in line with the mission of the empire. So we want to take this back to Dr. Ian this morning. And Dr. Alexander has worked with him and knows him firsthand. So, with no further ado, Dr. Alexander, if you would be so kind as to bring us up to speed.
So brother was taken into custody by ICE on the 26th. So that would be last Friday, I believe it was. And you know, he's been here since um 1999, I believe. And um, so it's stated that he's overstayed his order. He had received a deportation order and this, that, or the other. What needs to come clear is where he was in that process, because in the manner in which they are trying to characterize him and caricature, if there is such a word as, so what would that be? If you're making him into a caricature, is that caricaturize?
We make up our own words. We're not going to be limited
All
by
right.
the colony. You understand?
So
The
they're
point
trying
of
to do
talking is to
both.
communicate. I understand what you're
Yeah,
saying.
yeah.
Say
So
it.
they're trying to characterize him as a caricature, right? And so um, what we know is that he's been he's been teacher, he's been principal, he's been assistant superintendent, he's been superintendent, and he's most recently superintendent. And so he has worked from the East Coast to the Midwest to the West Coast and back to the Midwest. Um, and I think what's important to note in the context of all of this madness is that these are all public sector jobs. This is not a person who is, uh, in some kind of subversive, you know, th- th- this is not the person that they said that they was coming for, all of the criminals and all that kind of stuff, which is why they're trying to muddy him up. And so, um, my concern in this, and I think I said it last week, is that, this is the kind of situation where we'll find out that, we'll hear something to the extent of, when we checked on him last, he was fine, and when we came back, you know, the worst possible thing, because we we still don't have a clear sense of what's going on in this. But my thought is the degree to which they are, the more that they are functioning on, his credentials, the more I question that his um that his well, I'm always questioning, as long as he in their custody, I question his well-being. I'm just saying in terms of the motivation. I, on the front end of this thing, that this is all politically motivated. That there's somebody who doesn't look like Ian in Iowa who's very upset that he is the superintendent of the largest school district in the state of Iowa. And the thought that he would be hired away from California to come to Iowa through a national search would not have yielded a national search did not yield any questionable data, kind of suggests to me that again, this is just these people doing what these people do. Um, and so, and even now, the he's detained allegedly because his paperwork is not complete, and he's not authorized to be here. I'm not understanding why him resigning as the superintendent is even news. He about to get deported. So I don't even know what that means. What do you mean he resigned? You just said he can't be here. So I just don't understand why that would be news at all. And but what was, in as a part of the smear campaign, they're noting like he misrepresented this, that, or the other. Um, it appears that there were at least two, maybe three separate entities involved in the vetting of Ian, bringing him to uh, to Iowa. And so, and again, to the degree that these are public sector jobs, we know that through 23, all of his credentials were fine in terms of the citizenship. Doesn't mean that there may not have been a lapse, but I have no reason to believe that he just decided he's just suddenly not going to adhere to whatever has kept him here since 1999. That just don't make sense to me.
Well,
And
the thing
so,
that, the thing that we have to always keep in mind is the arbitrariness that America has with black people that they consider.
correct,
There is absolutely no linear pathway to anything.
correct.
Because they didn't, I mean, you just look at the discrepancy in the VA home loans that they gave. Just look at the discrepancies of the black farmers and the white farmers and the support that they gave them and are giving them. So the rubric that's being used, we know is a sliding scale and really has to do with what the individual that's in charge of providing the information that he needs and the documentation that he needs and the authority that he needs had for breakfast on the given day that he shows up. There's an arbitrariness that we have
There's a very
to deal with.
yes.
And in addition to that, with respect to, and we're going to deal, I'll deal specifically with the substantive question of his doctorate. There are individuals that are given doctorates or the title with a contingency all the time. There could be a final editing of a paper that needs to be done. There could have been a class that needed to be done after the almost defending your doctorate. So that's an issue that you really have to take on a case by case basis to determine the actual substance of that information. So, but I
And
think.
again, I don't know where all of the I don't know where even that stuff even comes into play. All I know is he was assistant superintendent of schools in St. Louis. When I met him, he was doctor then. He was superintendent when he went to the West Coast. He was doctor then, and he came back to the Midwest as doctor then. And so, like, so it can't be that he just simply misled you. It's your job to vet. And so, and that's what, somebody in Iowa saying, we've been misled. No, no, no. You had a search firm, and ultimately is your job to make the hire, and this, that, or the other. Now, that being said, all of this stuff about MIT, the search firm has indicated that there was nothing in the information that not the search firm, but the school district has noted that there was nothing in the information that he submitted that referenced MIT. So that's somebody else putting that in here. And then, him having guns, I don't now if you tell me he don't have, you know, you tell me he's running guns, that's one thing, but he lives in Iowa. So you can have guns. And so I assume, unless you tell me otherwise, that he has, whatever. So here in the state of Illinois, we have FOID cards, and I don't know that Iowa is or is not an open carry state. I don't know what they require in terms of handguns, but he had a rifle, and so I don't know that you can't have those things in your car. So I don't know that that's a problem, and and the guy's paid pretty well. So I don't know. I don't know what he was doing on that day. I don't know that there's a problem with him walking around with $3,000 cash. I mean, he makes probably $300,000. And so, you know, the my whole point again is that if you think he's here illegally, then let's just handle the case. I don't know, other than that you don't like the well-dressed black man who wears his hair in braids. Why the need to have all of these random conversations when at the end of the day, any conversation in the educational realm, the brother's history is impeccable, which is how he even ended up um, in Iowa to start with. And but last but not least, person that I talked to who is probably considered to be, a political operative, has shared with me that at the state and local level, there are Republican candidates who are already running on "We caught him." So this is really a targeted attack. If the brother needed to get his paperwork in order, he needed to get his paperwork in order. But he's the dang on public. He's one of the highest paid officials in the state of Iowa. So this was not a I'm sneaking around doing this, that, or the other. That part of the narrative that, somehow or another he's some subversive guy. That just needs to come out. And we need to be able to look at that in context. So if he needs to be deported, deport him. But all of this other stuff, this smear campaign, clearly is not necessary unless you really ain't got what you need to deport him.
Well, I'm going to repeat what Mike Jones had to say last week. We need to think about what subversive means in this enterprise, and that might be his being
It's
is
being, yes.
Attorney Gerald Christmas. What are your thoughts on this situation? Folks are saying they're gonna come after us next. I just want to know when they have not came after us.
Right about that. I think we're living in a time period where so many people are living abundantly that they have lost sight of what has happened in the past and what people had to sacrifice in order for us to live in the way that we live now. And so you and I and everybody, Dr. Alexander and Mike Jones, we understand the struggle has never stopped. It just evolves. It's never stopped. And with the situation in Iowa, they have enough to deport him, but it's just not enough for them to deport him. They want to completely annihilate his character and use him as a platform to elect more like-minded people like themselves. That's why they're running on this story now, and they're expanding it because they're opening up all these investigations into how was he hired, who was all involved. And so that's going to tie up a lot of time and a lot of focus. And it'll be a lot of energy for them and the negative side of this that comes against us. Also, they're keeping him in Iowa. Now, normally when they are deporting people, they have moved them quickly from where they pick them up and they move them down south. They've been putting them and holding them in Louisiana, Mississippi, Texas, more favorable states for them and easier to then get them out the country. But they have kept him in Iowa, and they charged him with a felony for having a weapon. So not only do they want to deport him, they want to make it where he'll never be able to get back in the country again. They don't want any options for him to come back at all. And that's why they're coming with the criminal charges now and keeping him in Iowa and not, because my concern initially was the safety issue and moving him where he would be at and then how fast they would get him out the country. But they really want to make a major production out of this. And that's why he's being charged with the felony now too. Because he is going to be a news story that they use for quite some time to try to propel their agenda.
And
real quick, I just wanted to add to add a bit of context even to the statement that attorney made with regard to living in abundance. That is a part of this attack. And so on the one hand, we have, to Attorney Christmas' point, we have folks living in abundance and literally being aloof of the constant onslaught. But on the other hand, the onslaught is driven by the abundance. If we were not succeeding, if we were not, striving and thriving, this would not, these kind of assault, we wouldn't have a Trump.
We always, if you look at history, Dr. Alexander, they always come down the hardest on us when we are our best organized and doing our best and moving forward.
Absolutely.
You look at any of those massacres that have occurred across the United States, it wasn't because those communities were failing. It's because those communities were thriving and they could not tolerate the fact that they were thriving, so they came and burned them up. They didn't burn them up because they were struggling. And we've lost sight of that and understanding. You're absolutely right. That's why we have a Trump. Trump is clearly the side effect of having an Obama.
Yes.
That's all it is. That's all it is. It takes no serious critical thinking to understand and know, how they operate. And that's what that is. And that element is always bigger. That's what we're looking at now.
Yes.
But we're looking at the 2025 version of it.
Yes. And even with Trump, the response to Obama was the Tea Party.
Yes.
And so, and so we keep talking about this, Trump just emboldened it. This thing started before Trump.
Right, long before, and it flows through both parties. It flows through both the Republican and the Democratic Party. It's not
and
just
so
we one-sided with it, and we believe that we have some saviors on the Democratic side, but they're more problematic because they wolves. They are wolves
and the blue dog Democrats.
We've got to get rid of this inevitability mindset that things are going to get better over time inevitably. Each and every gain we get has been hard fought even if we made it look easy. And that's what we have got to remember.
But we only remember those things when we are placed in situations like this. And it just always takes me back to my grandmother. A lump of coal does not become a diamond without pressure.
You know,
And, and it's
on
the
that
pressure that opens us up.
on that line of thought, Attorney Christmas, there I've spoken to individuals in the last 2 or 3 weeks that have had abrupt about faces on their former mindsets about this enterprise. Now, I've talked to a guy that has been extremely successful, and he, not too long ago, the man told me that the division in America was based on class. Well, this man voluntarily, essentially reversed course and told me that, you know what, I think race is the major driver in this. I think you're right.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah. And Trump clearly understands that. That's why he goes to these poor, uneducated white people and gives them status. As long as he gives them status, that's all that they are concerned about. Even though he may also have his foot on their neck, also be taking away their benefits, he still gives them status and lets them know no matter what, you will always be above the Negro. And I will always treat you in a special way. You have that status. And that's what they crave. And that's what we constantly go through a cycle of.
Let's move on to the next subject. It's been reported that President Trump has formally endorsed Project 2025. Water's wet also because he's certainly been in line with it. What are you all's thoughts on this reported undertaking?
For me, it's less an issue that he's formally endorsed it because it was clear that this is the playbook that he ran on, um, and this is clear that this was the playbook that was being enacted once he came into office. Uh, what's important to me in any conversation is about 2025 or Project 2025 is that again we revisit the implications of you know our relative progress. Too many people, whether it be folks in the Democratic Party or as it pertains to us, Black folks, with means and influence, were dismissive of 2025 conceptually, right? Like, it don't matter that this is what they're doing. First of all, folks weren't understanding that it in and of itself is not a Trump thing. It's it's the Heritage Foundation, and it is not. It didn't just come about in the context of Trump running. This has been the stick-to-itness of the enemy. It is a collection of everything they've ever been fighting and every agenda that they've ever had and forged. And so, and I had conversation with some folks one day, and I was like, okay, so we riding with Biden, and these jokers got a 700-800 page book, right? That was my whole point with the whole thing. You need a copy of that, yeah. Um, should be a copy over there. And so then that was the whole point of the thing is that they have a they had and have a plan. They have and had an agenda. And our agenda is um it's not
Reactionary at
so
best.
yeah, at best. This and then we get into these places where it's clear that we don't have an agenda, and then we fall back on, well, they ain't gonna do that.
Doc,
Change on the
Doc, let's just go through and chronicle what had to happen before they got to a 700 page written and bound a Bible for them. There had to have been these things start in think tanks. So they
correct.
started in a think tank. Then after the think tank, they implemented those in the universities. Kevin Roberts is the one that wrote, that was the mastermind behind that. It was implemented in universities. You started seeing these themes in theses, PhDs, theses, and so forth. Then you take it to the politicians. And they're at the, so, Amos Wilson used to state all the time, you cannot fight these things with weekend organizations. These are
No,
things that have to be thought out. And these are things that have to be implemented, and they're long term. They've been working on this since Reconstruction, if for real.
correct. Correct. And we have to look at the aftermath of the first Obama presidency as, you know, either we can look at it as either the second or the third Reconstruction. So in theory, we need to look at it as the third Reconstruction. So we can look at post-civil rights as the second Reconstruction. And we can see and the emergence of Ronald Reagan, kind of rolling back everything. And so that's another piece in which we struggle in terms of how we conceptualize, you know, so folks, so our age cohort and, folks, 25, 30 years are senior. We're not always looking at the 70s and with the appropriate context. The the fight of the 70s by the political party, by the Republican Party, was the suppression of whatever relative gains that were achieved by the movement, throughout the 40s, 50s, and 60s. But we don't look at it that way. Now we do look at it like, Reagan was a racist, but we don't look at it that way. Like I saw a picture. I saw a picture. I was looking at Facebook the other day. The sister had on a T-shirt said Reagan sold crack. I'm sure that most people just thought that that was her being slick and not and not understanding that that's literally what happened, right? Um, you know, people talk about people. So like right now, people are talking about all of this aircraft stuff. This air traffic stuff was an issue then. That was the Republican Party destabilizing the unions, and the air traffic controllers were a major issue in that time. People don't look, we're not really looking at this thing in the manner in which it happened. And so that was an assault, that was an affront. And so we came out of the Reagan piece and we go into the Bush piece, and then our savior becomes literally a blue dog Democrat. So you got black folks excited about Clinton because he was from. So because he's from the South, he's supposed to understand us. And so this joker, he was never for us, never good to us. Right now, he wasn't the Republicans, and so we felt some measure of reprieve. But we come out of his presidency with black folks blaming ourselves for the omnibus bill, when in reality that is really just him and Joe Biden. We asked for that. When we ever got what we asked for?
And it's
That's
interesting, Dr. Alexander, excuse me, just on this point before you leave Clinton. I was just thinking about that. I had a sentencing in St. Charles last week, and I thought about how my client was sentenced to 15 years and the co-defendant was sentenced to 34 years. And this is all because of the Clinton Biden era when they pushed the enhanced punishments in the crime bill. And it's still having a significant effect on us and will continue to have an effect on us. We have to have it repealed. If people don't understand, and we also are not saying enough about it, because we're in this time period now where the responsibility is really on us to come up with a plan and facilitate and execute it. Because even when you think about earlier, when you said, people 25, 30 years older than us, there's really not a lot of people left 25 and 30 years older than us. And so,
we're that senior class now. Yes.
yeah, we're in that senior class now. And so that crime bill is still a problem. And the punishment that our people are getting as a result of that, because it's just continued to expand as a result of that, we're past punitive. It's cruel and unusual punishment because after individuals spend this amount of time incarcerated, there's not much that we can do because they go in with issues and they come out with issues and they come back to a community that's already dealing with issues, which is what's going on right now. And it's very problematic for us. And it's all rooted back to Biden and Clinton. And as you indicated, we thought because he played the saxophone and was from Arkansas that he was black and understood our plight and empathized with us. And we should have known that Biden didn't from the way he talked about us on the Senate floor when he was trying to get the legislation passed. He all but called us savages.
Mm-hmm.
And we still turn around and elected him president. And that's where things are so problematic. And with the 2025 plan and Trump publicly endorsing it, all it is just a wake-up call to Black America that nobody's coming to save you, and we got to save ourselves, and we really got to drill down and focus on ourselves and ourselves only. The first rule of nature is self-preservation, and we have not quite fully understood that we have got to put ourselves first. We feel like if I don't know why, it may be, and you can help me with this, it may be some side effect of being enslaved, some Stockholm syndrome or whatever, but we feel like if we put ourselves first, we feel guilty for doing that.
It's called
And feel like we have
alienation. It's called alienation to some degree,
Okay.
disorientation. And
Because everybody else does it. Everybody else does it.
you're going directly in the same
Mhm.
direction that we need to. Number one, what's the solution? Number two, why in the world do we want to be a part of this thing so bad? Number three, why do we continue to feel so alienated? And I just like to get you all's opinion on that.
It's also the programming too, Brother Larry, because we always are programmed and we fall for that programming. And you have to be conscious. Even I find it with myself because sometimes I will automatically click to the programming of self-blame or having a negative thought about my own people. And I have to catch myself and remind myself because you have to deprogram yourself and you have to be conscious of it yourself in order to deprogram yourself. Because we constantly being bombarded. Just look at what they're doing now. I want to use this one example and I would like to hear you all's input on it. This is a time where we really need to be focusing on what's going on and what's happening and what the situation is in our community. But they got us all sidetracked right now on a feud between Cardi B and Nicki Minaj. They do that all the time.
Yes.
People, they run around, they don't know nothing about Trump and 2025, but they can give you the breakdown of what's going on between Nicki and Cardi. And I think that's just pure foolishness and what they do to keep us off. When we need to be the most focused and drilling down on ourselves, we off on some foolishness.
That is correct. And I want to ask this question to both of you all. To what extent does the social, economic, and political climate and oppression that we suffer have on your clients, Dr. Alexander, and your clients and from the criminal standpoint. So, in other words, if in fact we didn't have these traumatic stressors, socially, politically, and economically, would we have these maladaptive behaviors, and would we have I mean, to what extent, what criminal issues would we have? And I just like
I
to,
probably wouldn't have any criminal work if we if we didn't have this, because it has a significant impact on my clientele all the time. The pressures they're under, uh, the education deficits, the economic deficits, all of that affects them. Uh, the lack of having a male role model in the house is significant, and we know we're the only people that were paid to not have a man in the house, and that has had a significant. Before I can open the file, I can tell you a couple of things already. You know, very seldom am I representing a male on the criminal case that has a father in the home. Very seldom. I could probably count them on one hand, one or two hands.
when I was in DC doing work for the Justice Department representing defendants, I could almost write the police reports, and I can tell you the next time that I see a father standing there with a defendant will be the first time.
Right. hmm Now, I've had some fathers, but very few. Like I said, I can only think off the top of my head, maybe about five. You know what I'm saying? Where, and then that, and those usually get worked out. Honestly, they usually get worked out quickly. They usually are not that serious. It's just some shenanigans that went, left or right, or were overcharged, some issues like that. But those usually get worked out.
Dr. Alexander, you have any thoughts on that?
Yes. So chronic. So what we get from oppression, period, and definitely government sanctioned and orchestrated uh, oppression, i.e., institutional racism. It leads to chronic stress, which ultimately will lead to anxiety and depression, and and for some psychosis. Uh, all of which has you on its, all of which is traumatic and just continues your course, you know, along that line, just in the space of trauma, so you get into a pattern of trauma, and and that trauma becomes multi-generational, as we are seeing, and that leads to poor health comes, which lead to um, which lead to uh, lower, shorter life expectancy in maternal and infant mortality. So, like all of these things that we see, um, you know, so if we look at the top 5 causes of death, all of these things are a result of not just poor lifestyle. The poor lifestyle is a reflection of the oppressive conditions, right? And that's how we have to look at these things. I was talking to a gentleman yesterday, and he was saying to me, so let's talk about healthcare. I said, okay, let's talk about healthcare. He said, so is the issue um, access or race? And I said, well, brother, what do you mean access? Well, is it an economic issue or is it a racial issue? And I was like, brother, you can't separate them. And he's like, oh, well, no, because of this economics, so he's going around in circles. And I was like, okay, let's just cut to the chase. Economics is a social science. Race is a social construct. You don't separate them. Those they they come they come from the field of social science, and that's how you understand them. And in the United States, you have to understand that your economic viability is a function of your race. Now, of course, when we run across Black folks who say that kind of thing, they're typically folks who are well off, right? And they're overstating, the Black folks got access to care. No, we don't. You got access to care. I got access to care, but everybody don't have access to care. And then even those who have access to care don't all have, equity in terms of that access to care. We don't all have access to the same quality health care. But, so for the black person who, would rather blame us than to look at the structural forces in place, that too is a manifestation of the oppression. And so Attorney Christmas reform referred to, I mean, so it's in those higher classes of folks that we I mean anybody could be, experiencing and impacted, anybody can manifest, what we call internalized racism, or in this case, to Attorney Christmas point, Stockholm syndrome. uh, but you really see it amongst, these higher folks who really believe that they, and Attorney Fields, you say this all the time, success for Black folks in the United States is very arbitrary. And so, but most Negroes all think they did it themselves, right? And so when somebody else hasn't done it, they just ain't pulled themselves up by their bootstraps, right? And so, but that's what the oppression looks like. That's what at every level, and it impacts every level. Why is it that we have that sisters? The maternal birth rates and I mean the infant birth rates and the maternal mortality. Those things don't vary across economic status. That's how you know the issue is the system.
Exactly. Say that again. And see, I mean, there, everything that you stated to, I mean, you guys have stated is just so spot on. That, and not only does it not vary with sisters, but for white women in lower economic classes that don't have access to higher income, that don't have the resources of higher income Black women, the mortality rate is still lower in rural areas. And
Mhm.
so it is 100% race in that regard. To what extent can we blame these disciplines, the criminal justice system, and as well as the mental health system, for the classification of these things and the perpetuation of the isolation of the modalities and the criminalities that we see, or as we have them reported?
And so the thing is that and so this is another reason why you got to pay attention to what the United States does and doesn't do. So two bodies that the United States, particularly under under Trump, has become two bodies, but historically has really just been one body. So historically, the United States hasn't been all in on the United Nations. Why? Because the United Nations will attempt to hold the United States accountable for its imperial and colonial, endeavors. And so, and 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 in so doing, the United Nations will do, like, I don't think any other country has been cited more than Israel, right? And so the United States ain't in with the United Nations unless the United Nations is going after some, whatever they perceive to be, some rogue Eastern European entity or some African entity, right?
Something,
And
something
so,
that something that foments their interests, period.
correct,
And, and
correct.
and we know what their interest is. Their God is money and control.
And so, but what you get from the United Nations is a set of standards and a set of international, um, kind of uh, definition and precedents. And so the United States doesn't want to adhere to those. The United Nations has ruled that the United States needs to pay us reparations, right? So the United Nations has come up with that. And so the United States ain't all in with that. United under Trump, the United States is not all in, or the United States don't want to do nothing with the World Health Organization, which does the same thing as United Nations, but in the context of medical and mental health, right? And so they don't want no, rules, and they don't want no order as it pertains to health and well-being, right? And so that's how you notice this is a fascist state. That this thing is about total control and domination. It's not about the health and well-being of the people. It's about the health and well-being of the elite, right? And so to the degree that we think these Negroes that we know that have, 13, 14, really most of them got like 1 or 2 billion, but they can be important to us, but they're not important to this thing that make this go. Them all collectively just make an inf of, probably the top 20, 30, 40, 50, white billionaires individually. Them guys they got more wealth than, than all of the black billionaires and millionaires combined. Any of them jokers by themselves. And so, but all of that is a function of how we are taught, and how we are taught. If we are, the more mature we get, we should become a little more, reflexive and reflective, and understand that we really weren't. Our education isn't really predicated on the accuracy of historical fact. Our education is predicated on propaganda. And so all this propaganda is, kind of based on this notion of survival of the fittest and all that kind of stuff, and manifest destiny. When in reality, what we see is, a what amounts to a socialist government for rich white folks. So they get all of their needs taken care of by the government, but anybody else that is supposed to be getting any benefit from paying taxes, um, not so much. Which again is another thing where it's clear that we don't know what they had us read, and we too many of us don't read on our own. So like if you get into this whole conversation about segregation, desegregation, and all that kind of stuff, we had to fight the fight because we were paying for what we couldn't do. We were paying taxes and didn't have access to the public libraries that were funded by our taxes. So we needed to have a fight, not to have a fight to go to the library with white folks. We had to have a fight because they were funding the library with our tax dollars and weren't giving us our own library. They would rather close the swimming pools that they built and maintained with our tax dollars than to either build us swimming pools with our own tax dollars, or to give us access to the swimming pools that we built, which is the same things with the schools. And so when you have these folks running around talking about we just doing all that to be by white folks, no, we weren't. We were doing that because we were footing the bill anyway. But if you don't understand it as such, you can't process it as such. And so
And
my
to
thought
this
has
day,
become,
there's no equity unless you have proximity to them to this day. It still
to
has
this day,
been leveled
correct,
correctly.
correct, correct. And so to that point, to this day, there's no equity unless you have proximity. So all ultimately that the combination of white flight and let's say housing laws and the elimination of restrictive covenants, which by and large comes from um, the case in St. Louis. Um, all you all you got was then black flight, right? So the black folks who could left, right? And so you take out the resources, and then all those Negroes left who could, and then they'd be like, well, if you support the businesses in your community would look better. Well, Joker, the folks that's in the community, most of them aren't, you know. So first of all, the overwhelming majority of us who work in either public or private industry, we don't make dollar for dollar with white folks. We make 80 cents. A black man at best make 80 cents on the dollar. You got to get into these spaces where, you are, you know, kind of like in our spaces in these professional services where you get the bill. But even with that, that ain't no that ain't no assurance that you're getting paid with what the market will bear. Because because ultimately, yeah, it still kind of comes down to who's your clientele. And for the overwhelming majority of us, the super majority of us, our clientele is going to look like us, which is great. That's who we're going to service. But if we think that that's going to yield for us, man for man, the same thing that it yields for them, is ludicrous. You you are unhealthy if you believe that.
And the other thing, the other notion that I would like to dispel is the fact that black folks don't support black businesses. That's a
Which is
lie.
another falsehood. That's
That's a
correct.
lie. Quit lying
That's
on
correct.
black people because we go out of our way. And I have had several businesses that have been a large part supported and driven to service the needs of black folks that have shown up. And if you don't believe me, in terms of the value of the black consumer, just pay attention to the advertisements that you'll see today from Mercedes, Lexus, Toyota, the ambulance chasing law firms. So we've got to wake up.
Right. And so we do have to, so a part of the piece, so we got to wake up. Part of our slumber is a manifestation of the oppressive state, right? So this is an effect. This ain't a cause. This is an effect. And so this is what psychological misorientation looks like. And in the world of Black psychology, that's the most fundamental and basic mental, the most that's the most fundamental and basic um, mental health illness and uh, and health abnormality, and
And
that
it,
is
it,
the
now it
consistent.
can work in your favor sometimes if you have visions of grandeur and say and you think you're more than you are. But the problem is we think we're less than we are.
So to that point, it it will likely have it can work in the favor of the person who does not work in the favor of the masses. It's in
Eh,
that
eh,
space that
Exactly.
you get Snoop. It's in that space that you get Kanye. It's in that what's the sister they always be talking about? That's a Republican apologist. That's where you get those people. That's where you get Tim Scott. That's where you get Ben Carson.
Candace
That's where you
Owens,
get other. Say that again, attorney.
Candace Owens, that's who you talk about.
Candace
I'm
Owens.
talking
Yeah.
about I'm talking about the folks with consciousness, Doc. I'm talking about them because those people that you all mentioned are really counter to civilization and humanity.
Yeah, I mean, but I'm not sure that you're gonna find a person that has consciousness that is significantly. So we all touched by psychological
Significantly
disorientation.
disoriented.
Yeah, I'm not sure
You
you're gonna
said
find a
there's an
person with
oxymoron in
consciousness.
short.
Yes. They
I
certainly been touched
understand.
by
We're
the
in a
malady,
different
but
time period. We're in a
yeah.
different time period now. And because we have several generations now that have grown up in a certain way, we have grown up in an integrated world. and I think we've had this conversation a couple of times about, the effect that integration has had on us, just as Black people. You just see that we lack the courage that we had decades before. And I completely agree that we have to wake up. I just can't quite grasp what it's going to take to wake us up, because we have all this in the face of us right now and we still are not waking up.
It's
Yeah. And,
almost
and, and so all of these things that happen. So like, you know, the passing of marijuana laws, all in the state of Illinois, probably was the same in Missouri. You get Black folks on board because you say, well, and we're gonna do the social justice part to it. If you went to jail because you went to jail or you had any issues with with corrections or whatever because of some, drug conviction, some marijuana. So we're gonna make you privy. You're gonna be pushed top to the list. Well, whether I got arrested or not, the issue is the the issue is do I have 200, 300, $400,000 for me to play? And so if I ain't got that to play, I still ain't gonna be able to take advantage of this. So that's just that's the scam to get me involved. And then but all it has really done is just increase substance abuse. That's all that's we got all these people
Would you
riding
please say
around.
that again? I mean, because we have individuals in our community that swear that they are advocating for our rights and at the same time promoting this foolishness. And it's just never made sense to me that we would promote cannabis in any form. I mean, and you can slide it in as a remedy for sickness while you're on chemotherapy and this and that. And I'm sure there are some non-lethal aspects, taking the THC out and so forth. But by and large, as you stated on this show 2.5 years ago, when referring to one of your clients who was using it for X, Y, and Z, and you looked them in the face and just said, "Oh, if you just want to get high, just get high," and say that or something to that extent. But that's where we are,
Yes.
and and I have to view the individuals that entertain that with a great level of suspicion. I don't believe that you're for the people if you can be for the dissemination of marijuana in our community, because one of the tenets that was used to eradicate the civil rights movement was cannabis.
And again, I don't care if any particular, you know, vendor, businessman, businesswoman. If you want to be in the business, be in the business. But to sell this thing as the panacea for, you know, at different times, stagnant Black business, that is that's delusion. So, you know, if there is a failure of Black business, it ain't because we couldn't sell weed. And so let's get at the core things. And so the fact that we could sell cannabis in and of itself, it doesn't it just ain't no panacea. And so what is
We're
gonna
not even
create
dominating that market. The
we
cannabis
can't dominate
market,
the
we're
market
not
because we can't afford to get in it. That's
exactly.
that's the whole point, attorney. It's like we can't even afford to get in it. And so,
And that's been
you know,
nationwide.
and that's nationwide, and so and where Black folks are in it, by and large, not absolutely, but by and large, where Black folks are in it, they in it in the same way that they get into most things that we get excited about when we see such and such as he part owner of this. But no, really he got the percentage necessary for this joker to get some kind of federal kickback. So he in at whatever, whatever the MBE, percentage is for where he is, whatever kind of similar calculation it is. The entity, the larger entity wants to bid on some specific work and it's going to bring you in because it's got to have this percentage of minority ownership. That's how we get to, more than a few of these places. And I'm not saying that that in and of itself is a bad thing. I'm saying that that's not what they sold you. They told you that they doing this for you because you've been wrong, and this is a social justice initiative. But really, all it's been is a way for white folks to get legally into the weed business, and that's it. That's all. And the government gets to tax it. And so, really, what you did was made the street industry, harder on folks than what it had been, because now folks who, since it is legal, folks who have the option to purchase legal recreational marijuana don't want to go and get it legally because the taxes make it cost prohibitive versus what you could get on the street. So you take what you get on the street, which in essence is putting you at greater risk because you don't know what's in it at all. And so it's just one big circular thing. But it all comes from again, this is what oppression looks like. It makes it very hard for you know for you to benefit. It's very hard for you. It impacts your executive function. I'll just say that, which you need to have good, intact, and executive functioning in order for you to exercise sequential reasoning that helps you to make, you know, good decisions more often than not. And so that's how all of this thing plays in. But for those who feel that they've arrived and they've gotten to this comfortable space, it's just easy to say, well, you're only getting what you don't want no better, blah, blah, blah. And that's not true. And but that is the state of things. And we still, as we've always needed, is that critical mass that continues to fight the fight, because everybody who ultimately benefits ain't gonna be veterans. They're gonna be people who are sitting on the side watching. Well, we can't be worried about that. We got to make sure that we do the fight and we fight, you know, for those who cannot fight for themselves, and to some degree, those who would not fight are going to benefit as well. And so, but that part of it can't really be our issue. We have to walk and talk truth, kind of regardless.
And that is 100% correct. And once again, the desire to make use of those mind-altering things that affect our executive decision also may be slightly related to the political, social, economic environment that we find ourselves in.
It certainly can be. And again, it's like, so it's not that there is no medicinal benefit for it, but because there is. Now, and you just referenced it. I mean, if you want to get high, just go get high. I'm not about to argue with that, but let's not try to elevate this thing into something that it really ain't. And so if we want to talk about the medicinal benefits of it, then just use CBD. And you don't have to go through the mind altering point. You can get the pain relief you need. You can get the anxiety and relief from depression that you need. So the mood, you can get the relief and the anxiety and mood disturbance space that you need with adequate dosing of CBD. You don't have to use the mind altering drug. Now, if you want to get high, if it chills you out, fine, do that. But let's not, because in that regard, it ain't no different than alcohol. And it's the same kind of conversation I have with people with that. I don't need to go see no therapist. I just need a stick and I need, good bourbon, and I can work it out with my guys. Well, not so much. But if that's what you think works for you, I get it. But again, better for me if you just tell me you like to drink. I like to drink, and so I'm not drinking for medicinal purposes. I drink because I like to drink, and so. But those other folks who feel a need to kind of justify those things and look at those things, alcohol would be a great example. And so, if alcohol, if weed is going to be a savior, then why hasn't alcohol been that for us? We got more alcohol, we got more liquor stores and black churches in our inner city communities than anything else. So why we ain't got no liquor barons? And the person that we thought was a liquor baron is, in the midst of a, what looks like
reorganization to
a
say the
quick
least.
a quick demise, right? You know, and so but all of this stuff, it is kind of it's not kind of, it is a function of it's an effect. It's not a cause. This is what it looks like to grow up in this thing. This is what it looks like for a people to evolve in this thing. Because this has been the nature of Black people in this thing since the Black people have been in this thing. We
All
came in
right.
this thing as a commodity and we remain in this thing as a commodity.
Well, what's the solution, Gerald T. Christmas? And then I want to come to Dr. Alexander. What is the solution?
Ultimately, I think the solution is unity. The way that they are always able to have an advantage of us is through disunity. And there's a reason why, emoji is the first principle in Kwanzaa, unity, because we can't even get to those other things without that. And that's what I try to focus on. I try to focus on trying to keep us united and uniting us when we can, because I think that's most important.
That is wonderful. Dr. Alexander, what are your thoughts?
Um, that we keep doing stuff like this, that we keep, attacking the prevailing narrative, and that we keep, that each one teach one thing is a real thing. Um, we just got to know that all of our fights are gradual. Um, and things, it's very basic things that work very well. So the thing that works very well for us is education, right? And so we have to be thoughtful about what what we consider education, what that looks like, what that means. Um, we have to be thoughtful about education, vocation, da da da, which are all things that have been argued amongst, you know, Black leaders and Black leadership since we've had Black leaders and Black leadership. What does education look like for us in this thing? That is an ongoing debate. You know, we got Black folks here voting for choice, and then watch their local schools get decimated because they take money from that school and put it into a charter school that's full of the kids that they would have went to school with in their school. And so now you got this private entity using public money to miseducate kids when and they probably ain't got no school board, right? They're not operating under the same mandates and dictates. They probably don't have licensed teachers, right?
They operate in
When
the same way as private prisons.
they and so but so much of that is, our folks, they don't know, and so much of that is because, so this part isn't a misnomer. This part is the truth, and that we need more of us investing in us where we are. And so that part has to continue to happen. But that stuff can happen. That stuff can happen within the context of increasingly, so So you mentioned it earlier, like, when we were talking about when I brought up the psychological misorientation piece, the more we do this, the more we combat the psychological misorientation. That's and so we have to continue to at the knowledge level, kind of right the wrongs and help people to understand, the limitations of this thing and why things work out for us a certain kind of way all the time,
We,
or at least disproportionately.
absolutely. I think we are going to have to remember, not just to, thought, but rejoin. I think we have got to begin to see ourselves as Africans, as part of a pan-national group, and act as a nation inside of a nation. Everything about this place has worked to our disadvantage. I mean, the diet, the healthcare, the education. We are going to have to view ourselves as a nation inside of a nation. And we're going to have to decolonize everything about ourselves, the way we think, the way we eat, the way we consume information, the way we judge information. We need to understand that, as Amos Wilson said, a black child in a school sitting next to a white child, it should interpret the same information totally different. There's a reason why the vast majority of our classmates, and I mean all three of us, would rather go to a job that they hate for, six figures, as opposed to starting something inside of their own community that may start out at substantially less, but grow into something that's 10 times that. There's an orientation that we have that devalues ourselves, while individuals that come to this country and and the status quo understand that. But in business, there's a principle that's called blue oceans. The blue ocean is you go where the needs are. We're in a community that has more needs than anyone else. Pick a subject and just work. So, I mean, let's start today building self-reliance. I was looking at the NAACP's financial plan for Black America. Oh, I'm sorry, that wasn't them because they don't have one. We need to get serious about what we need and understand that, certainly religion is a part of it, but we may not find all the answers in the Bible, that the way that it's interpreted. Now, when Jesus
But
taught
but what answers that we can find in the Bible is how we should move.
how we should move, but we won't do that because we're interpreting that difference. When God told Moses, I'm going to give you your own land, but you're going to have to fight for it. We don't want to fight for anything. And so, coming from that, the
Well,
way
we
it's,
don't want to fight for the right thing.
well,
We
that's a
don't
whole
want to fight for the
different
right thing.
story.
I mean, back to Attorney Christmas's point, we will fight to we will fight to listen to Cardi B and that other person. Um, we'll fight for that. We'll fight for the right to be able to listen and watch that. We will
But
fight
I
for
don't
that.
consider that anything, so you have to excuse
I
me.
know you don't. That's
So,
my point. My point is
yeah,
that
yeah, that's
but that is again, that's an effect.
it is a
That
huge
is an effect,
effect. It is,
right? And that's
and
what
it's
this thing
intentional.
looks like.
It's
It
intentional.
isn't, yes. And
It's
that
intentional.
that that is a part of the propaganda. And that was part of the conversation I was having with a gentleman yesterday. So we because we got into this whole thing about Republican and blah blah blah. And I was saying to him, I was like, well, brother, the fact of the matter is that this agenda that they're saying is a Republic agenda, the family first and the whole family and church. I said, that's who black folks are. We are family oriented and we are spiritually based. They done hijacked black family life and made it into a political, a political entity or what have you. And we believe it. And so now we believe, we've started to believe. Clearly the brother I was talking to yesterday believes that we are uh, that we are not socially conservative. I said black folks are socially conservative. I said all of this stuff that you get via propaganda and marketing would have you to believe that most black folks are snoop. Most black folks aren't snoop. But what has happened is that Snoop gets paid to be that, and so he's been rewarded for such, and that he gets to help white folks feel good about the oppressive conditions that the masses live in.
But see, once again, in your field, we don't associate ourselves with who we should. Now, everybody, the vast majority of folks will tell you about the B.F. Skinner study, but they associate themselves with the experimenter instead of the rat. The rat was the one that was being being manipulated in a reward and a punishment system. But
Correct.
and in this case, Snoop is being rewarded for doing, what the experimenter has asked him to do. And
Correct.
conversely, I'm not going to say that Puffy wasn't wrong, but he's being punished for some things that he's done in this system that they didn't care about. So, yeah, I mean, there's just
And again, this can be how off we can be on this thing. So so we'll say stuff like, you know, they're going at Puff because he's black. They're not going at Puff because he's black. They're going at Puff because what he did was wrong. Um, but but let's say they are punishing him because he's black. Let's say that that's true. Are you saying to me that you endorse what he did? Because too many times we'll say, well, if he was white, he'd have got away with it. What what does that mean? So 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 is it okay that he did what he did? And the only reason he's getting in trouble is because he's black. White folks do that kind of stuff all the time.
that is
So
a
we go, you
conversation that
know,
we need, and that is that the level of accountability that we hold one another to is a whole
oh my
show that we
gosh.
need to work on.
But
Because
again,
that's
that
the
that is
issue.
a function of this thing.
That
This
is correct.
thing, this thing makes it, we're vulnerable to that.
Well,
We're
and
vulnerable to that.
if the thing was consistent, we would assume that when it punished one of us, it was right. But it has not been consistent. And the 50% of individuals that have their sentences overturned that we know about, we understand that there's something wrong with the system. So we can never look at it with a level of legitimacy and without skepticism. So we really
Correct.
don't know. You don't know, and so you have to put the onus on the system.
On the system. And up until last year, maybe the year before, but so let's say up until like the last 2 years, we'll just say to be safe, you know, Illinois was the exoneration capital.
It's the exoner, and that's what I mean. So I mean, folks are being exonerated at a rip rate. So I mean, how can you believe anything? And we're not going to forget that Chairman Fred was just murdered in his bed while he slept right there, and these
Absolutely.
sort of things. So I mean, we
And
all
and and it was established and proven, it was proven and established that the city, the county, and the states and the feds were all complicit in the assassination of Fred Hampton.
and so we have to remember in my a lot of these things. And the bottom line is this: that should be in your foundation as an individual of what you're dealing with. That doesn't go away. I
Okay,
mean,
so that's a and so that's the thing, Attorney Fields, and that it's unrealistic to believe that all of our kids um are going to go to an independent black school, right? That's just not reasonable. But it is reasonable to believe that all parents would be actively engaged in the education of their child. And And so that foundation that you're speaking of gets shook at a very, very early age by a combination of factors that include how their parents and the other adults in their lives are impacted by this thing, and how their educational process occurs from those formative years up within the context of this thing. Because unless your parents are resilient and intentional about your formal education and your extracurricular activities, it's probably not going to turn out well for you.
And I think that's a good place to
And
end.
that's one of the major problems that we have in the community. That's, because we have those deficiencies in education in the
Mhm.
family.
Final
Yeah,
thought
and
from you.
again, it's effect. It's effect, and we have to look at this thing as effect. And the more that we look at this thing as effect, then we'll correctly pivot toward the cause, and we can continue our fight. We know that we're in a fight, and we know that we're actually kind of holding our own. If we weren't at least holding our own, we wouldn't have a Trump.
And since you've been out a while, Dr. Christmas, we're going to let you close us out with the final thought.
We have to lead with courage, and we have to stay united. We have to stay focused, and we have to stay educated. It's everything that each one of us has been saying, but we have to make a conscious effort to do that. And we have to be thinking and focused on it all day, every day. No one is coming to save us. If we don't save ourselves, we will not be saved. And so we have to drill down and we have to make ourselves number one. The first rule of nature is self-preservation. And we have to make sure that we're able to preserve ourselves.
Amen. And that is going to conclude our show for today. We thank you for tuning in to the Level Set. And if it's God's will, we shall see you soon. Thank you.